Hello everyone, this is Rohan and welcome to my channel. So in the last video, I did the conceptual fundamentals of k-fold cross-validation, and in today's video, I will implement GridSearchCV, which is one of the primary method to implement k-fold cross-validation to find the best hyperparameters for your model. Now, before we move on, a quick word on my YouTube channel that I plan to upload videos quite frequently. So if you have not subscribed yet, please do subscribe. And if you like the video at the end, do not forget to hit the like button. All right, now about GridSearchCV. This is the exhaustive search method with k-fold cross-validation. And it pretty much moves through each values of every hyperparameters that you pass to it and ultimately gets you the best hyperparameters or the most optimal hyperparameter for which your model performs best. That is, accuracy of your model is optimal, and then you can run your final model with that value of those hyperparameter. But the problem with GridSearchCV is that because it's an exhaustive search, that is, it checks the whole model training for each value of the hyperparameters of all the hyperparameters you provided. It's very much CPU intensive and computationally intensive, and of course that means time consuming. So for large data sets, and if you have many hyperparameters, sometime it may not be the most optimal selection to choose to find your best hyperparams. But anyway, in this video, I'm going to implement the GridSearchCV, a custom version. That is, I will not use this Sckit-Learn GridSearchCV that you can see right now on my screen. So this is a much simpler version, but just to check, just to understand that how the k-fold cross-validation actually gets implemented in a GridSearchCV concept. So in this implementation, I'm only going to accommodate k nearest neighbor as a model, and so this function that I'm going to build right now is not going to accommodate other algorithm like XGBoost or LightGBM, random forest, etc., because in that case the function needs to be much more exhaustive, and it will become a much more larger project in itself. So anyway, that's the plan of today's video. Now let's jump in. And here I'm starting the code for writing GridSearchCV from scratch with pure Python. First, these are all the standard libraries that I'm importing. The one to note is this one, make classification. With this one, I will create a data set randomly created from a particular distribution, and the others are all standard: train, test, split, standard scalar for standardizing my data. I'm importing NumPy TQDM for visualizing the process while a long loop goes on, so it will show me a sliding bar, a progress bar indeed, and yeah, and the random module of Python. So the first one I'm doing is I'm creating a data set, manually creating a data set with this make classification method. I could of course take some already available data set either from some university library sources or from Kaggle, but here I'm just creating one data set because I can control all the parameters of the data set. So let's understand quickly what the parameters are here. Number of samples is just a number of samples, that is a number of rows that it will create. I have selected 10,000 here. Number of features are the number of columns of the features. I have selected 2 here. Number informative. These are the informative, I mean, to talk basically, it's the informative features in the data set. So let's just quickly look into the data set. The official documentation of make classification. So it says generate random in-class classification problem. These initially creates clusters of points normally distributed, that is with standard deviation of 1, about vertices of an n-informative dimensional hypercube with sides of length 2 into class separator, and assigns an equal number of clusters to each class. It introduces independence between these features and adds various types of further noise in the data. So the important point is n informative. Without shuffling, X horizontally stacks features in the following order: the primary n informative features followed by n redundant linear combination of the informative features. Okay, these is the most important points to note here. Look at further on the definition of n number of features and then n informative. Yeah, that's what I was looking for. This is the number of informative features. Each class is composed of a number of Gaussian clusters, each located around the vertices of a hypercube in a subspace of dimension n informative. For each cluster, informative features are drawn independently from a distribution with 0 mean and 1 standard deviation, and then randomly linearly combined within each cluster in order to add covariance. The clusters are then placed on the vertices of the hypercube. Okay, actually it's quite simple. It's represented as in a slightly a bit more technical words, but it's just actually quite simple things, that any informative features are just linearly independent features, and this is what is most important for this data set. I do not want linearly dependent features. That will be controlled by this one, that is linear n redundant. So I have set it to 0. Let's look at the definition of this one. Yeah, so n redundant is just a number of redundant features. These features are generated as random linear combinations of the informative features. So yeah, sometimes you do want that in some for experimenting with some models or some algorithms, but in this case, to keep things simple and straightforward, I have chosen this one to be 0, but the default value was 2. Okay, and the number of cluster per class. Let's look at the definition. So the number of clusters per class, okay, they have not explained in detail. So basically it just clusters in the class. So here also for our current exercise, it's best to keep it at 1. And okay, so with that, our X and Y are ready. And then I'm just applying this train test split to split my data set into X train, X test, Y train, Y test. I'm keeping stratify at yes and random state at 42, pretty standard code. And then if I print these shapes of this dataset, X train and X test, I get X train, they have given 75% of the data. That is by default, train test split will split 75% into train and 25% into test, and that's what I get here. All right, I just forgot to mention the one quick thing, which is the meaning of the stratify equal to 1 and random state equal to 42. So stratify equal to y means that the train test split method returns training and test subsets that have the same proportion of class labels as the input dataset. So input dataset is X and Y, whatever the class level proportion were in these original dataset, the same kind of proportion will be maintained in our splitted dataset here. So that's what the stratify equal to y is doing. And then the random state equal to 42. Again, the random state equal to 42 here, whether it's 0 or 1, that does not really matter. What matters is it's the same number. So if you don't mention the random state in the code, then whenever you execute your code, a new random value is generated, and the train and test datasets would have different values each time. However, if you use a particular value for random state, for example, random state equal to 1 or whatever it could be. For example, in this case, I have used the most commonly used value, which is 42. Then every time the result will be the same. That is the same values in train and test datasets. So basically, the random state is just to check and validate the data when running the code multiple times. Setting random state with a fixed value will guarantee that same sequence of random numbers are generated each time you run the code. And unless there is some other randomness present in the process, the results produced will be the same as always. So this helps in verifying the output, especially when you have to run it multiple times. And the motivation for using random state with a fixed numerical value for the purpose of this video is that I will be using this split dataset to plot my results from the custom grid search function that I will create. And so when running that same function again and again, I want to see similar kind of plots. So that's why I have put it to a fixed number, random state. So basically I use random state parameter for reproducibility of the initial shuffling of training dataset after each epoch. And talking further on these concept of random state, it's kind of similar to the seed concept of in TensorFlow, or the seed concept in any programming language for that matter. So you can refer to these very nice Stack Exchange discussion that I found pretty useful. The question they're asking is, should you use random state or random seed in machine learning models? And some of the great answer, like this one, it says the intuition is correct. You can set random state or seed for a few reasons. For repeatability, if you want to publish your results or share them with other colleagues, or if you are tuning the model in an experiment, you usually want to keep all variables constant except once you are tuning. Further, another answer, it says, yeah, this is pretty nice and compact, that it says setting a seed or fixing a random state controls randomness. When you want to do a controlled experiment like what we are doing currently in this video, you need to control randomness to some extent to achieve reproducibility, and by that also comparable result. Yeah, so reproducibility and comparable results between epochs, that's the main motivation of using it here. But another point to note is that I usually set the random state variable, not the random seed, while tuning or developing, as this is a more direct approach. When you go to production though, you should remove random state and or random seed setting, or set to none, then do some cross validation. This will give you more realistic results from your model. Yeah, this is an important point to note. All right, that was enough talking about random state. I prolonged this part a little bit because this is such an important concept in my mind. Anyway, now let's move on to our code. All right, now finally our grid search custom implementation from scratch. So before I start with this function, GridSearchKNN, I need a little utility function, which is this one, get random 60% indices. So the only purpose of these function is to that I will give it an array, and it will return me 60% of the sample data from that array chosen randomly. So that's what this function is doing. It's just using the random module of Python and the sample method of the random module, and it's returning me a length from the given array. That is, this is the population. Let's quickly look at the documentation of random, so it will be clear. So what all this random function does is this module implements pseudo random number generator for various distributions. For integers, there is uniform selection from a range. For sequences, there is a uniform selection of a random element, a function to generate a random permutation of a list in place, and a function for random sampling without replacement. And so that's the random module. It will so basically it will generate a pseudo random number. And let's look at the method that I'm using, which is sample. Where is sample? Yeah, here is random.sample. So this method takes two arguments mainly, population and the k, and the counts. It's I'm not passing that one. So what it does is return a k-length list of unique elements. K-length list of unique elements chosen from the population, sequence, or set, used for random sampling without replacement. Okay, that's exactly what I want in this case. That is the first argument to sample. I'm passing the whole population of xtrain array, and then for the number of k, I'm giving it, I want 60% of the given array to be returned, and that's what I'm using. This particular calculation here is 0.6 multiplied by the length of the xtrain, and actually it will be xtrain arr. Yeah, xtrain array, and then it will return me in an integer format. I made a little mistake here. It will be small x, because that's the argument to the function small x train array. So again, this function get random 60% of the indices, all it's doing is that it's returning me 60% of the sample data from the whole population, and this is my whole population, that is the whole of x train array. And then after this utility function, my main function, which is grid search knn. And the most important point to note here, that these function that I'm implementing here, it's a custom grid search, only will accommodate knn algorithm. The Sckit-Learn's grid search accommodates all the other algorithm as well, like XGBoost, LightGBM, random forest, so on and so forth. But this is much more simpler implementation of the more exhaustive Sckit-Learn's implementation, and this one will only accommodate knn, because otherwise this function needs to be much more complex and much more exhaustive, which will become a project in itself. So here this whole function is only for knn classifier. So let's go ahead. So first I'm just declaring these two variables for holding the mean of the accuracy score that I get during my calculations within each fold. So this will give me the mean of the accuracy scores from each of the folds that I will implement in here. So the first step is I am looping through. So mainly there are two loops. First, I am looping through all the nearest neighbors in the top loop, outer loop, and then inside it, for each number of nearest neighbor, I will loop through each of the folds in folds. So what is my folds? This is one of the argument to grid search knn, and folds can be the it's a number of folds that I want to operate k-fold cross validation with. So this can normally be 10, which is the most common number in many machine learning training, but it can be anywhere between 2, 3, 4, 5, or sometimes even 20, and so on and so forth. So this is coming from this argument, and that's what the inner loop is. And most of my calculation will go within these within this inner loop, because I have to run the entire knn and get the accuracy score for each of the fold. So this inner fold will hold most of the calculations here. So let's take a look at it again. These in neighbors is just I have kept these exactly the parameter name which is there in the Sckit-Learn's k neighbor classifier. So there is this parameter in neighbors which takes integer as its input, and it's just a number of neighbors to use by default. And coming back to my implementation, again, remember that these GridSearchCV knn, the whole purpose, ultimate purpose of this function, that it should give me the optimal k value of the k nearest neighbor. So what is the number for these in neighbors? In neighbors will take an array of list like this one that I will pass in the next cell. So in neighbors will take a whole array of list like this, 3, 5, 7, 9 up to 23 in this case. So and within this range, this function will return me what is the optimal number of the in neighbors that will give me the best accuracy score. So that's the purpose. So first, the outer loop, I am looping through the number of neighbors. So each of the fold, all this calculation will be repeated for each value of the n neighbors, and that's why it's at the outer loop. And then the inner loop starts here. I'm looping through each fold of the folds variable. So folds will be a particular integer number, which is an argument to this function. So within each fold, first I'm doing is I'm extracting 60% for my training, 60% of the sample data for my training by implementing these function that we just defined now, utility function get random 60% indices, and passing it the whole x train array, which is an argument to this GridSearchCV, and this function will return me 60% of the samples data from x train, and that will be my train indices. Remember, this is train indices. These are the indices of those sample data that I need to extract or keep separate from my training. And if by the fundamentals of GridSearchCV that we discussed in the previous video, that if my training indices are these, the cross validation indices will be the rest of the samples data. So practically the cross validation indices will be whatever is left after selecting the X-train samples. And that's why these line, take a note of this line very well. This is very important and very kind of interesting piece of code here, that I am implementing the set which will remove all the duplicates and return me all the non-repeated values from a range or list. And all I'm doing, these from the whole X train, this one, I'm deducting the indices already selected. That's all this line is code is doing. Pretty simple. Just from the whole list of X train, I'm deducting the indices from deducting the indices of the train set that has already been decided in the previous line. So whatever I'll be left to it, that's my cross validation. And that's the whole fundamental of k-fold cross validation, that I will, from each fold, I will separate a training set which is 60% here, and the rest 40% will be my cross validation. So from each of the split, I have a training set and cross validation set, and for each fold, thereby I am I'm going to get an accuracy score. That is, I will train my KNN model on the training set and get a prediction from that trained model, and then check that how good is a prediction by calculating an accuracy score compared with the cross validation set. All right, so that was kind of the most important part within each fold. And then all I'm doing, this is because this is indices, it is not the actual array elements, it is just the indices. And now I have to select the array element from this line, which I'm doing by xtrain, and then just passing, I'm just extracting only the train indices, and same I'm doing for ytrain as well. From the ytrain, I'm only extracting the train indices that will become my labels, that is a y value for train. And similarly, I am doing the exactly same steps repeated here for my cross validation. That is, from the whole X data, I am choosing only the cross validation indices, and from my whole Y cross validation data, I'm choosing only the cross validation indices. So my X train, Y train, XCV, YCV is ready. So now this data is ready, my input is fully ready. Now all I'm doing is just invoking the nearest neighbor fit function. That is, I first declare the k, that is KNN classifier in neighbors is a parameter, and that has to be an integer, like we just saw in here in the official documentation. In neighbor takes an integer, by default it takes 5, but it could be any integer number. So I am selecting k, and what is my k? This is this k. That, remember, from the outer loop, we are looping through each number of n neighbors, and my n neighbors are these list 3, 5, 7, 9, and so on. So my first k will be 3, next k will be 5, and so on. So that's why in the inside loop I am declaring the n neighbors to be the first k, which is 3 in this case, and then I'm applying the fit function. It will fit the data, that is x train and y train, with this k value. And after fitting, my model is ready to give me a prediction value. So I use a dot predict function of the k nearest neighbor, and this again comes from the official documentation. So this is official documentation, and if you check, there is this method called predict, and I'm in the documentation of k neighbor classifier of Sckit-Learn. So what my predict will give me is predict the class labels for the provided data, and that's what here it is, that I am predicting the y value for my x train current fold. And x train current fold has already been defined here when I extracted only the train indices. And so I get the y predicted train. That means my so now I have y predicted, and I also have the ground truth, that is y train current fold, which is this. So that means I'm ready to calculate the accuracy score, and that's what I'm doing in the next line, that is train accuracy score folds, which this array was defined inside here. Train accuracy score folds, it was defined inside the inner loop. I'm just updating this list with the accuracy score for this fold, and that is train accuracy score. Where did it go? Train accuracy score folds, yeah, dot append, and I'm making use of this accuracy score method that I have already imported at the very top. It's coming from Sckit-Learn again, accuracy score, and I'm just passing the actual ground truth y train fold, that is y train value, and the predicted y train that I just calculated in the previous line, and that gives me the accuracy score, and which is being appended to these array. So now I come out of that inner loop, and now that fold particular that accuracy score was determined. Now I also have to, for all the folds, that is I'm here for each k in the k nearest neighbor, I am looping through each fold, and after, for a particular value of nearest neighbor, for example say 3, after I am done with calculation of accuracy score of all the folds, I have to average it. Remember from our previous video, we have to average the accuracy score from different folds and then take a mean of that, and that's what I'm doing in this line. Remember, this is I'm already out of my inner loop. I'm already out of these loops, these folds actually. So if my fold is 5, all the 5 calculation have already been done. So I have 5 accuracy score from this inner loop, and now I have to calculate the mean of those 5 accuracy score, and that's what I'm doing here, and updating this array by I'm using numpy.mean function, and again I'm converting to np.array, because numpy.mean ideally should take np.array, and then train accuracy score folds, this list, which has been updated here. And the same for this one, cross validation accuracy score array from mean, and again I'm taking the mean and appending to this array, and finally from this function I'm returning the mean, the array which contains all the mean from different folds. So return train accuracy score array from mean and the CV accuracy scores array from mean. So that's my final return function, which is a mean from each fold. So again, remember, if my if my k4 cross validation, it has 5 fold, it will give me 5 accuracy, and then I will take for each fold I will take the mean of those 5, and that's what this final array will contain. That for each value of n neighbors, it will contain the mean of from different folds. So let's just quickly draw the diagram just to make these concepts easy again. So here I'm trying to draw a little picture to explain what this function is doing. So the first for loop, that is here, the k into qdm params n neighbors will start with the number 3. And remember, again, this n neighbors is a sequence of numbers starting with 3, and it can and I will pass ultimately a sequence of 3, 5, 6, 8 up to 23 or 24 to check for different values of k in KNN algorithm, because k is a hyperparameter in KNN algorithm, and the whole purpose of this GridSearchCV is to give me the best hyperparameter, that is the best value of k for which I get the best accuracy score. So this is the first for loop, the outer loop, and the inner for loop will run for different folds. For example, if I assume this will be a 4-fold cross validation, it will run for 4 different values: 0, 1, 2, 3. So this is the inner loop. This is the inner loop, that is this one for fold in range folds, and this folds is again the an argument to this function. And so if I run it for 4 folds, that means it will run this loop, inner loop, for these different folds, but for each fold it will split the data into training set, training, which is 60%, and cross validation, which is 40%. And it will do for the next fold as well, training CV, and the next training CV, and also the next training CV. So this inner loop, for each of these each running of this inner loop, I will split the data into training CV, training CV, training CV, and that I'm doing through this function, get random 60%, this function. And the cross validation part is just chosen from the rest of the after choosing the train indices, from the rest of the indices is the cross validation indices. So this is pretty much the splitting, and after each split, after this split, from this split I'm calculating these predicted value, y predicted for my for my cross validation, and also y predicted train. And then from these different 4 folds, I'm getting a mean of all of them, and that's what I'm doing here. And that mean I'm appending to the final. For each fold I will get one single mean. For each run of the inner loop I will get one single mean, and that mean will get appended to these final return value from this function. So yeah, so that's pretty much the GridSearchCV custom. Now let's quickly plot one to see the exact functioning of this. I just forgot to mention one quick point, that after I do the splitting in train and CV, what these steps are doing pretty much is that I'm running the KNN algorithm on these. I'm fitting the KNN algorithm on this train data, which is this line fit, yeah, this line knn clf dot feed, and then I'm passing x train current fold and y train current fold. So I'm fitting the knn algorithm for the train here, for the train here, train data here, and then I'm calculating the accuracy, and after fitting it, then I will get the accuracy score. I can get the accuracy score both from my train data and also from my cross validation data, and I'm actually indeed calculating these accuracy score from both train and cross validation, like in here. Train accuracy score folds and CV accuracy score folds here, and then only then I'm calculating the mean from that. And now finally I'm just implementing this GridSearchCV function that we just built in the previous cell, and passing. So here I'm first importing a kneighbor classifier from Sckit-Learn, and then declaring a neighbor variable, neigh variable with the kneighbor classifier class, and the params for the hyperparameters I'm passing in neighbors, which is the main hyperparameter for KNN algorithm, and I'm passing all these values as a sequence or list of integers, and the number of folds that I want to run this is 5. So and so here is my function. I'm only passing x train, y train, this neighbor, params, and fold as 5, and x train and y train has already been defined earlier here after the train test split. So this function will return me the train score and the CV score, and internally it will make the k fold cross validation with number of folds being 5, and then to check the results I am running these. Remember, this GridSearchCV will give me the train accuracy score and CV accuracy score mean from my custom implementation of this function. So these values are actually is going to be accuracy, and so is this one, because I am going to plot it in the next cell. So the CV score accuracy, and I'm taking it here. I'm just in the next cell. I'm just plotting this accuracy score against the various values of k. We'll come to that in a second. Let me correct this one. Train scores accuracy. Okay. All right. Let's just run this cell. Okay. So this is, as you can see, these with this progress bar, it's running for 5 folds, and let's wait. Yeah, it's done 100%, and now I will be plotting these accuracy score against various values of k, and we'll check that which value. The ultimate goal of this whole exercise was to get the optimal value of k. So in this cell, I'm just plotting 2 simple plotting. The first plot is just the train score accuracy. The second line is CV score, and here is a plot I'm getting. So the most important thing is that I have to choose a k for which I get the maximum accuracy for my cross validation plot, but also the distance between these 2 peaks should be the minimum. So I can see that this is the point This is the point which is my optimal k from this graph. It's something like, I think it's almost at 15. So 15 in this case would be my ultimate most optimal k value for running the k nearest neighbor algorithm after doing the cross validation, because at 15 my cross validation plot is giving me the highest accuracy, and also at this point the distance between the train accuracy score curve and CV accuracy score curve is like it's almost minimum as well. All right, so I think that pretty much wraps up this video. All right, if you like the video, please hit the like button, and also I will be uploading videos to my channel quite frequently, so please consider subscribing to my channel. All right, see you in the next video.